Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Naomi Menon and I am the Head of Compliance and Operations. Just so you're aware, everybody is on mute today, but there is a facility if you'd like to type questions as we go along. Please feel free to do so. This webinar will be recorded and it will be placed on our website probably tomorrow. And we'll also create a PDF of this webinar and make that available to you at the same time. So today's agenda, we're going to go through the ATAS Charter and 3 of its main attachments. So you should be aware that recently the ATAS Charter underwent a review. It was reviewed by Mr. Hank Spear and it was open for submissions for review. The reviewer has completed his review. The board has approved a number of his recommendations and these have now been implemented into the Charter. So all ATAS participants must comply with the Charter and also the attachments to the Charter, which is the Code of Conduct and the solvency definition and terms of reference. So we'll touch on each of the bits that have been changed today. Hopefully it won't go too long. I'm hoping to keep it within half an hour today. So firstly, the Charter is effective 1st of July 2018 and it's referred to as Revision 5. And as this screen shows, it's replacing the previous version, which was Revision 4A, effective from 1st of March. So just to give some background, the ATAS Charter, as I mentioned, previously had 6 attachments. So together combined, they make the ATAS Charter. As part of this review, a number of these attachments have been removed. The reasons for this is there was a lot of duplication, but also a lot of these 3, which is the deed poll, the schedule of fees and the complaint handling policy, are more templates that need to be changed from time to time. So we've removed the deed poll and the schedule of fees and the complaint handling template. And these are all available still on the AFTA website, but don't need to form part of this document. One of the real goals was to make it more user-friendly for the agents. So by doing this, we've reduced the amount of pages from 77 pages of the entire document down to 43. So it makes it much more easier to understand, to flip through and to get knowledgeable of. So the first main part is in the ATAS Charter is the eligibility criteria. And by this we mean the criteria you need to comply with to become an ATAS participant and also to remain as one. Somebody has just said to me we've lost sound. Is that still happening? I'll continue. Send me another message. Okay, other people have said okay, so I'll keep going. So to become a participant and remain, there's 9 key areas of criteria. The first one is you have to be a travel intermediary, and the next is that you have to sign our deed poll, and that is the directors signing to agree that you comply with our ATAS Charter. So the ones that are highlighted here are the ones that have had some change. So I just want to show you overall where the picture is, what we'll be touching on today. So there has been some changes in the business compliance and governance section, and we'll go over that first. The financial assessment, there's been some changes to the solvency definition, so we'll touch on that. Commercial safeguards, the PI, insurance and public liability, no change to that. That's one of the main criteria. There's been a change to workforce development, so I'll touch on that. A few little changes to the timeframes in the customer complaint handling and some other changes that we will go through. Payment of fee and startup business requirements. So no changes to those ones that aren't highlighted there. So we'll be sort of focusing mainly on the 4 key points. So the first one is there has been addition to 2.5. Previously, it just said you cannot be a participant if you're not solvent. What we have added to this is, or if you fail to satisfactorily meet the test outlined in the Attachment D of the Charter. And I'll go through that new Attachment D shortly, but we have added this into the Charter to give us more power when we are concerned about the solvency of a business to be able to remove them from being an ATAS participant. One of the other changes in the business compliance section, which was a recommendation of the reviewer, was to add in that civil offences are also to be considered when we're considering if somebody is fit and proper or not. So in the section G, which does talk about the actual financial assessment, this screen, the information was previously in the Charter. Basically what it says is an applicant must provide a copy of its latest financial statements and such other information as may be requested. If such documents are not provided within 14 days of being requested or within such a period as may be extended, the accreditation may be suspended until they're provided. So that's always been in the Charter and that remains, but what we have added is a few extra clauses. Now, these have already been in operation, but they did need to be in the Charter. So the first is that you need to submit your financial statements as they come available. So you might have done your renewal already this year, which is fabulous. Thank you very much. But if you haven't submitted your 2018 financials and you do receive them, what this is saying is we need you to give that to us to assess at that time you get it and not wait another 10 months at this point to do your renewal next year. It's important that we are looking at the most recent financial statements. And we will begin to start to send you reminders regarding that come 30 September, October. If you have not already submitted them to us, we'll be asking you when they'll become available. Again, we already do this. If you fail to demonstrate a satisfactory financial position, you may be placed on a conditional monitoring agreement, suspended or cancelled. Just stating basically that if you fail in that financial assessment, that there will be other actions, and each circumstance is very different. What we have also added is that where there may be some uncertainty either from yourself or from us, we will ask a third-party senior accountant consultant. Of course, we will get confidentiality around that and seek your approval on that first. But if a member is disputing an issue regarding solvency, we do have this right now to bring in a third party to discuss. So next I'm going to talk about Attachment D, which was previously looked like this. It was just a lot of words. It was very high level looking at what solvency meant. And the goal here was to revise this whole attachment to give more transparency to our members so that we can see exactly how we do conduct a financial assessment. So we revised that sheet, and I'll go through it a little bit more in detail. Basically, we've listed out a lot of the financial ratios that we run, and they're very, very standard accounting financial ratios. What is important to understand is we look at the entire picture. So when assessing solvency, it's important to consider all of these indicators together. So that's if you just fail one or two or, sometimes even three, we look at the whole picture. We look at the notes. We look at the entire situation of what's going on. In some cases, we might need to ask for more information. In some cases, we might need to get your parent financials. The whole picture needs to be looked at and assessed. So the common ones, the most important that we find is the current ratio, which is also known as the working capital. And most of you will be very familiar with all of this, but there are a lot of smaller businesses that we do find we have to explain these ratios often, and what working capital means and things like that. So this is helping to spell it out, what the expectations are for not only current members but those looking to join the industry. So obviously we find working capital is one of the most important. If there is a client fund deficiency, obviously that is also going to be a flag for us and a concern. Tax and super and GST, ASIC constantly, in every annual report that they put out about one of the top insolvency indicators, non-payment of tax and pay-as-you-go and GST is an indicator of insolvency. So that's why we've put that there. Can't always tell that from accounts and financials, but it's there if that's what we delve into, or we find out information that you may have some issues going on with the tax department, etc. And the debt to asset ratio is another one. Cash ratio we look at, not as important as the working capital. Debt to equity is another one there. And I won't go through them a lot in detail because that's the whole point that we've added and updated this sheet, is it so you can look at it and reference it, have a read of what you do or don't understand. And we've got net profit. We do run some other ones, and we run it through a system where it will flag you green or red, and that's how we know whether we need to look into things further and do a better assessment. Okay, so I'll move on from the financial assessment. We have given you all the links to the new charter and the code, so you will be able to see that full attachment D sheet. We do really encourage everybody to get familiar, especially smaller businesses, especially the newer and the startups, to familiarise yourself with that sheet. So the next area I'm going to talk about is workforce development. This is what the old charter said. It said all ATAS participants must ensure 30% of the consumer-facing staff have a Certificate 3, or we do accept as recognised prior learning a minimum of 2 years. This has changed from 30% to 50%, and that was approved by the board. So that is something that was one of the significant changes in the new charter. Okay, so when we have added a clause regarding withdrawal, if in the instance we have chased you and said that we're going to consider cancelling you, then we have added this clause to basically stop you from being able to voluntarily withdraw when we are about to cancel you. So what we do if we are thinking about cancelling somebody is we send them a notice to show cause letter to basically give them an opportunity to respond and say why they shouldn't be. So we will cancel you on the basis that you failed to respond to those matters, because it's sort of not fair, basically, that you're not recorded as to the public that there is some sort of concern about the business. There's you have rights of appeal in regards to all of those matters, and we are very fair. So the next part that we'll move on to is one of the big changes. The old charter did used to have all of the complaint handling policy and details regarding the ATAS process. We have removed all of that from the Charter now. You are still all required to have a complaint handling policy, but now it sits inside the code only. And this removed heaps of duplication, which is great. So now if you're looking for what the process is for how you need to and we need to, and then the appeal process, it's all in the code. So I'll move on to the code now. Now, as I said before, the code sits as part of the Charter. It's referred to as Attachment A. However, the code is a consumer-facing document, so you are able to download the code separately. We have included a link for you. It is available on both the AFTA website and the ATAS website, being on the ATAS website because it is, as I mentioned, consumer-facing. And the code outlines all the obligations that ATAS agents need to demonstrate. So the aims of the code remain the same. There's no change. It's there to set a minimum standard of behaviour and delivery. It's about holding all ATAS accredited agents to the same standard, establishing an independent process for assisting consumers and agents to resolve complaints, and building the professionalism of the travel agent industry into the future. So one of the main obligations under the Charter is the service quality promise, and it lists the obligations. There has been a few changes, and the ones in green are new. These remain the same, but we have trimmed them down. Some of the sentences were long and superfluous, basically, so we've tried to make it user-friendly because it is something that all staff within your businesses need to be aware of. So in providing our services, we will advise you of any relevant options and alternatives to satisfy your travel requirements, taking into account your particular interests as well as our arrangements. We must be receptive to suggestions and feedback we receive. I trimmed that one down a bit. Need to disclose all relevant information in a plain and easy to understand form. It's probably one of the sections that we do end up getting a lot of complaints about, and that a lot of complaints end up falling under that category. We need to communicate with you or your representative in a timely manner. It all remains the same. And monitor external developments affecting how we provide our services, including changes in regulation and codes of practice. So just by listening to this webinar today, you're demonstrating that you are taking actions to comply with our code. So that is fabulous. Now, the ones in green that I'm going to go through now are basically the Australian consumer law, both the consumer law guarantees and the other obligations codified into our codes. So ensuring that your products and services are fit for any disclosed purpose is one of the consumer law guarantees. So you are subject to it, but it was never part of the code, and it's actually something that comes up all the time. So we've specified it here rather than putting it under another subject. Act with due care and skill is another Australian consumer law guarantee, and there's also, again, one that comes up again in a lot of complaints. And misleading or deceptive conduct. Again, another one, it's not a guarantee, it's Section 18 of the Australian consumer law, but it was previously missing as well from the code. To act fairly and in a reasonable and ethical manner was in there previously, as was to treat you with respect, consideration and courtesy. And then the reviewer also recommended that we put a catch-all in to comply with the Australian consumer law, which has been added at the end. So there's a number of other sections regarding pricing and advertising. We've been through that in some of my previous webinars. And other catch-alls like unconscionable conduct and things like that. If you ever have any questions about this sort of stuff, my email address will be at the end. Feel free to contact me. So a little change to this, getting a copy of the code. It previously actually stated that every agent should have the code on their website, and I sort of know for a fact that nobody did have that, so we did remove that, but it is, I would still recommend that you do promote it via the website. So the section says we will promote the code, we will make this code available on request, and we will advise you that the code's available at afta.com.au. As I said, it's also on the ATAS website. Oops, sorry, I've skipped ahead, sorry. Terms and conditions. Now, there's been no change to this, but I'm just going to highlight that this is, again, one of the most common areas that we get complaints about, which is that terms and conditions need to be provided at or before the time you enter into a sale. And I mean, it's pretty much basic contract law as well, but it is something that comes up time to time, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to remind everybody about that. Okay. So this is what it feels like at our offices sometimes, because we don't get to hear the good news stories, we just get the complaints. So the code is really all about the complaint handling process, and I'll pop this quote in. It says ATAS has a strong focus on consumer complaint handling and dispute resolution, and as a result we are actively committed to helping you resolve any complaint. So this is basically, the code, as I said, is consumer facing. It's you saying basically that you're committed to the complaint handling process and why you have a complaint handling policy. One of the things that people complain about, they'll have their initial complaint, but then they'll read the code of conduct and then they'll start regurgitating it back to us. So one of the things that hasn't changed, but I've added in here, is that they say, oh, it wasn't easy and free to access your complaint policy. So that's just something to be aware of moving forward. So I mentioned before that there was a lot of duplication, and in between the charter and the code and even the duplication within that, there was inconsistencies with the time frames required. So I've ironed all those out now, and basically the requirement is that you acknowledge a complaint within 5 days of receiving it, which I rarely see anybody not complying with that. And then that within 21 days of receiving, you'll attempt to investigate. So it does say attempt. What it also says then is, if you can't do it within 21 days, you need to advise somebody why there's been a delay. Little change here that we now reference our new online complaint form, which is available at ATAS. So you should know that we launched our new ATAS website in May, and this is a profile shot. If you haven't yet updated your member profile, do so, because you can put in your specialty areas, your logo, descriptions. We've made it so that it gives the user a much better experience. But now in the new website, it does highlight up the top there. You'll see there is a whole tab that is dedicated to lodging a complaint with us. And look, in the most cases, we do refer a lot of complainants back to you. We want to make sure that they have been through the process with you, because most complaints are resolved at that stage. Just go backing on this, if you haven't done your profile and you want some more information, by all means, just get in contact with me and we can help you get that profile looking as good as it can. So in the code, this is what it previously looked like. It had this box of eligible complaints and it had a box of ineligible complaints. It really wasn't workable for us. So we've removed the eligible list and basically said as long as it's not ineligible, then it's essentially it's eligible. Sorry, that might sound confusing. We removed, the reviewer recommended that we remove some of the ineligible complaints to make sure that we were being as fair as possible. One of them was the 6-month time frame, but they did say only where we can stop a complaint by the 6 months, only where it's unreasonable to do so. So that means that previously if something was more than 6 months, we wouldn't look at it, but we will look at it and determine whether it's reasonable to look at one on that complaint or not. The incident giving rise to a complaint was before the Charter. So the original code was written prior to ATAS launching, so there needed to be some change in the language. So all of those future tenses were removed to sort of make it present tense. They also removed criminal offence and findings of dishonesty. I mean, I would already look at if there was a criminal offence under the Charter that would sort of make you ineligible because of the business compliance. But he recommended those to be removed, and we do at least look at a complaint with that sort of an offence. Other disciplinary action, and where there's legal action, that sort of was combined into one of the options down the bottom. So if a complaint is given to us and it's already open with an NCAT or a VCAT or in court, we won't look at it. And in that regard, we won't simultaneously make a decision as they do. So we got rid of the box, and now what I've done is put it as a clause, so it's much more easy to reference when we say to somebody that their complaint is ineligible. So as I mentioned before, in the escalation process, stage 1 refers to when an agent does a complaint. And so before it said, well, there was a few references. It said 15 business days, it said 15 days, it said 14 days. I've just changed it. It's a flat 21 days, which is 3 weeks. So that's your time that you have to resolve a complaint. Can't be resolved, then you can advise them that they can lodge a complaint with us. And then myself have 45 days to determine the outcome of a complaint. And I can make one of 5 decisions, and that's either to seek to resolve it, which is what we do always in the first instance, decide that you've already taken a sufficient action to resolve. We can require you to take action, and I'll talk about that in 1 second, or we can find that you haven't breached your code obligations, or I can refer it to our independent committee, and I'll talk about that in a second. So where I do require you to take action, one of the new changes that has happened is that because we've made a requirement of you, there's a new clause that if you don't comply with that, it will then get referred to the AFTA CEO, who then at their discretion can refer it to the board if further action needs to be taken. And if you've never been involved with our complaint process before, that's great. But I will be doing a complaint webinar separately to talk more about the types of complaints we get, which might help you a little bit more in the event that you get one that does get escalated. So where a complainant is then not happy with my decision, they can appeal it to our independent committee. And they're called, well, they were called previously the ATAS Code Compliance Monitoring Committee, mouthful. But in this revision change, they have had a change of name to ATAS Complaint Appeal Committee, ACAC. So all of those reference, and basically, the way they operate, the appeal committee, is determined by this document, which is attachment F to the charter. So it does form part of the charter and is in this terms of reference, and it gives them the powers that I'll touch on in a second. So basically, the ACAC, or ATAS Complaint Appeal Committee, is who you make a complaint to about how I've handled your complaint. So we get the complaint about how you've done the complaint, and then they can make a complaint against how we've handled the complaint. So that's the final independent committee. It's chaired by Mr. Graham McDonald. He is an ex-High Court barrister. It has 2 travel industry representatives, and it also has 2 consumer industry representatives. One of the things the reviewer recommended, which the board implemented, was that previously that committee could reopen a complaint that I had closed, and that right has now been removed. If I've closed a complaint and they haven't appealed it, then it just remains closed. They don't have that right to reopen it anymore, which is good, because, you know, if I've made a determination and we've negotiated something, it wouldn't be good to reopen it. So that committee, the independent committee, there's no changes to what sanctions they can do. They can issue improvement notices, warning notices, a rectification order, and that might include having to pay back money. Publication orders, retraining, you know, mainly what we've seen, and there hasn't been that many appeals, is an improvement notice, a warning notice, and rectification, so that you did have to pay back some money. And lastly, the change we changed the way that the representatives have been appointed, so that it's staggered when their time is up. So it's good because we don't want to lose all that knowledge all at once. So there'll be somebody appointed for 1 year, and then 2 years, and then from that time on 2 years. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a understanding of how the Code Charter and the terms of reference all work together. One of the things that you might have seen recently is the marketing team have put out some consumer research, which I'd love to play for you right now, but I don't have those technical abilities. We have sent you the link to it. But we did some great research that really showed that if you are highlighting that your ATAS, consumers are more willing to book with you. And the reason for that is the code. It is that obligation that you've subscribed to voluntarily to say to a consumer, yeah, we're committed to having a process, external dispute resolution. We're committed to the highest standards of service for you. So the code and the charter is actually part of that selling point. So I encourage you, if you haven't seen that video, to definitely take a look at it. And I've also included the links to, I released these a couple of months ago now, but this gives a really great overview of the activity on a calendar year basis, what we do under the charter. A lot of people are really surprised to see just how many people we decline. In 2017, we declined 30%. So again, you know, being ATAS is something that, you know, you should be selling and be proud of, because you have met the criteria and you've demonstrated you've met the criteria. And there's also the code one as well, which gives an outline of all the complaints we've received, how many decisions we've made, and how many matters did go to appeal and what they decided. So they're also great tools, and I've sent the links for those as well to you. So, well, I tried to keep it 30 minutes, 40 minutes, not too bad for me, but hopefully that gives you an overview of the changes. Some of them bigger than others, not anything too grand, but they are things that you need to be aware of. As I mentioned, my next webinar will be about complaint handling process and standards and best process, and share with you all of the outcomes. And yes, so basically, if you want to take my email there and send me any questions you have, I'll be happy to get back to you. Or if you just want to take it down and you come across a problem down the track, happy to deal with that then. So if there's not any other questions, I will leave it there in the interest of time. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate you if you fill out the survey and give us back that feedback, because we definitely use that for future use. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.